Let's talk about the top 10 QuickBooks Online tips and tricks. Now, when I say top 10, this is the top 10 that I came up with. This doesn't necessarily specifically mean these are overall the top 10 for everyone. These are the things that I think that all accountants should know at the very least, but there's obviously a lot more things that you could be learning related to QuickBooks Online. You should be seeing my browser window. So let's start with what most of you would think is very obvious and probably we shouldn't spend a lot of time in, which is how to access a QuickBooks sample file, which essentially I'll be doing most of the work in the QuickBooks sample file to show you. So the best, easiest, fastest way to get to a sample file is to go into Google and type QBO test drive. So you type QBO test drive into Google, you click on the very first link that you see there that says test drive QBO, you click on that. Then you have to prove to the computer that you're not yourself a computer. Is that funny times that we're living on where we have to prove to a computer that we are not the computer. So we do the verification that I'm not a robot. Then we hit continue and it will pop up straight to a sample file. The reason why I want to make sure that I say that is because a lot of folks, when they ask the QuickBooks question, they end up logging into an actual client file to test things around. It just takes a really long time to log in. So that should be low-hanging fruit. Everybody should know how to quickly get to a QuickBooks sample file, especially if you're an accounting professional that's quickly trying to answer your client questions regarding QuickBooks. So let me open up the top 10 list. So that's one. The second one is reclassify transactions. And this one may not be as obvious to most folks because there is a tool that's only available for accountants to reclassify transactions, but there is a sort of quasi-hidden feature inside QuickBooks Online that all users have access to, where they can quickly reclassify expenses or transactions in QuickBooks, but most people really don't know about it. So the way you do is you click on expenses. So you're going to click on the expenses tab, and then you're going to click on expenses, right? So you get basically a list of all the expenses, and you have two tabs in the top. You're going to have the expenses tab, and you're going to have the vendors tab. So we're not going to go into vendors. We're actually going to go into expenses. So we'll click on expenses, which is really the default place where there is. And you will notice a column under category where all the expenses are already classified, or they have an expense category in there. So, very quickly, you can actually go into any one of these and reclassify these as any that you want. Now, something that's tricky about this screen is you never really want to sort by category because it resorts every time you recategorize. So you probably want to sort by date. That would probably be my suggestion. Sort by date, and then you come in here and you change the nature of any of these expenses one by one. Now, one tricky thing is there's no "Are you sure?" button, there's no save button, there's no other button to process. So if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, basically you're reclassifying these transactions to your detriment potentially. So that's one thing, and that's just to kind of do one by one. But you could also do them, let's say, for a specific vendor. So I can click on filters and I can click on payee, and I'm going to pick a specific vendor here. So I'm going to pick Robertson and Associates. That way I'm going to filter and only show all the transactions for that specific vendor. I'm going to click on apply, and then you're going to see all the transactions related to that vendor that contain an expense account or an account of some sort. Notice that the bill payment check does not, just because the check itself is really just designed to pay off the bill. So there's really no need to reclassify the check. So if I click on the select all button, which is that little box on top of the table here, that will select all the transactions, and I click on batch actions, and I should be able to click on categorize selected. The problem is that the bill payment check doesn't let me recategorize, so I would have to manually uncheck bill payment check. So then when I click on batch actions, I get a categorize selected button. Or what I could do is probably be easier to go to filter and then click on transaction type, and then maybe do all the bills first and then all the checks or something like that. So I can actually filter and do all the bills for this vendor, so Robertson and Associates. So I can reclassify all the bills in one shot, or all the checks in one shot. So that just the sort of the moral of the story here is that that when you want to do a whole bunch in batch, any transactions that do not affect expense accounts, income accounts, such as a bill payment check or something like that, will not let you do a reclassify all. So I'm going to select them all and only uncheck bill payment check. I mean, the other thing I could have done is I can just sort it by type, and then I could have just pick them off this way. That way they'll be more organized. Anyway, so once I have all the transactions selected, I click on batch actions, click on categorize selected, and then from here I can change the category of the transaction, whatever it happens to be. Click on apply, and that will change all the transactions all in one shot. There is a tool called the Reclassify tool that's just for accountants, but I actually find this one to be better and more powerful because I have filtering mechanisms. So it's funny, the tool that's available to everyone is actually better than the tool that's available just to accountants. Now, one really important thing is end users have access to this. So if you're an accountant that's a little bit overprotective about the work that your client does, or the work that your client destroys, if you want to call it that, what you may want to do is log in with your client's login, come into this screen, and then click on that little gearbox on the right side. So click on that little gearbox and then uncheck, or you want to remove from the list category. So if you remove from the list category, then the end user won't be tempted or won't have access really to changing the expense categories. Of course, if they watch the recording of this video, then you're screwed. They're going to know how to get to it. But that's another thing. Like, a lot of accountants really don't want their customers to have access to quickly reclassifying transactions. But as an accounting professional, I absolutely love the ability to do this. So I would love to hear how many of you didn't know about that hidden feature. Just put it in the chat box that you didn't know about it, just so I can know more or less whether it was new to most people or not. Okay, so let's move on to dates and keyboard shortcuts. And a lot of people know these as well, but I think they're valuable to go over. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard real quick, and then I'm just going to go to new invoice. I'm just going to create any transaction that contains a date field. And really what we want to focus on, it's on this date box. So I just want you to kind of look at the center of the screen, look at this date box. There's a couple of interesting dating shortcuts. So one is if I click on the date and I type Y on the keyboard, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the year. If I press T, now it's not Control T, it's not Command T, it's just the letter T, letter Y, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna press T, that will change to today's date, okay, whatever today's date happens to be. If I press M, it will go to the beginning of the month. If I press H, it will go to the end of the month. If I press Y, it will go to the beginning of the year. If I press R, it will go to the end of the year. Now, you can also press it multiple times. So let's say, for example, today's October 4th, and I want to go to, let's say, June 3rd. So if I want to quickly go to June 3rd without typing numbers, I would press M about 4 times. I would press M, 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 so 5 times. And then that brought me all the way back to June 1st. And then I hit plus and minus on my keyboard to go up and down one. So I can hit plus, plus, or minus, minus, and it goes down one. So that's what you have to remember. T for today, Y for the beginning of the year, R for the end of the year, M for the beginning of the month, and H for the end of the month, and do plus and minus. The other cool trick about dates is that QuickBooks will shorten the dates for you. So for example, if I want to put February 14th, I put 0214 and I hit tab, and QuickBooks automatically fills in the rest of the year for you, and you don't have to put the slashes. So let's do that again. Let's say I want to do July 15th. I just do 0715. That's actually the fastest way to get to it. Hit tab and do that. I find way too many people spending time clicking on the little box and then clicking plus, 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 or minus, minus, minus on the month, and then going to look for the date itself, or they actually sit there and put the full date with the slashes and the year. So that's actually a really important one to know. So again, T for today, right? T for today. Y for beginning of the year. You can press it multiple times and it'll keep going back to the beginning of the previous year. R for the end of the year. You can press multiple times R and it'll keep moving forward. T for today. M for the beginning of the month. You can press a couple times to go back beginning of the month. And H for the end of the month. And then you have plus and minus also works. Okay, so those are the dating shortcuts. Now the other one that we have is the keyboard shortcuts. Okay, So in order to get keyboard shortcuts, you have to press Control Alt question mark. So you press Control Alt question mark in your keyboard, and you will get this pop-up that says keyboard shortcuts. Now these keyboard shortcuts are enabled in combination with the Control key or with the Alt Option key. If you are the control key and the Alt key if you're on a PC, and the Control key and the Option key if you're on a Mac. So if you hit Control Alt I, for example, like you see there's an I, that will open an invoice. If you hit Control Alt X, it will open expense. If you hit Control Alt L, it will go to list. So let's try that. Let me zoom out for a second here. And so for example, let's say I'm sitting in the home page here and I hit Control Alt X. As I'm using my keyboard, Control Alt X or Control Option X, it will open up my expense. So again, Control Alt question mark will tell you what all those keyboard shortcuts are. So that's actually a really important piece, especially Control Alt F, which is something that we do quite a bit, which is going to the search transactions. I find that to be really valuable. So those are the dating shortcuts and the keyboard shortcuts. Let's move on to my favorite, which is the Chrome browser shortcuts and the Chrome bookmarks. Remember, QuickBooks Online is very, very, very browser centric. So knowing how to use the browser well, really it plays to your advantage. So you want to learn all the Google Chrome browser shortcuts, and I don't recommend that you use Internet Explorer or Firefox or Safari for QuickBooks Online. I strictly and only recommend that you use Google Chrome browser to do this because of what I'm about to show you. So a couple of really important things. Let's talk about opening new tabs. So for example, I'm sitting on my dashboard and let's say I want a second tab that contains my profit and loss report. So what I can do is I can click on the reports button. And then once I find a link that I want to look, like for example, profit and loss, I can do a couple of things. I can right click and click on open a new tab. That's an option, so I can do that. Right click, open a new tab, and you're gonna see here in the top of the screen that there's a new tab with my profit and loss there. So I'm gonna close that. The other option that I have is control click or command click in the Mac world. If I actually command click on that, it will open, let me just go back for a second here. I think it's control click on the Mac. Keep changing those shortcuts. So if you command click or control click, it will open the new tab, or you can just right click and click on new tab. So that new tab feature is really, really important, especially if you want to look at, for example, both a balance sheet and a profit and loss without having to exit out of one. So I have one tab up here with my profit and loss, and then I have my balance sheet on a different tab. So I can quickly go across tabs for that, and that works really, really well. And you can use Control Tab in your keyboard to toggle through them. So let me close this one. So for example, I have 3 tabs. I have my dashboard in one of them, I have my profit and loss in one of them, and I have my balance sheet on the third one. So if I actually hit on the keyboard Control Tab, it will cycle through the tabs. So that's actually another really good way to get through your tabs. The other question I get very often is, hey, what if I want to see the profit and loss and the balance sheet next to each other? I want to see them next to each other. So in order to do that, I'm going to have to make this browser window a little bit smaller. So what I'm doing is I'm just making the browser window a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to click on one of these tabs and I'm going to peel them off. So I'm going to click and drag and peel them off towards the empty side. So I'm going to peel them off all the way outside of the browser window, and it creates a new floating window, as you can see, next to it. So that will give me now 2 windows, which I now would have to then resize, okay, to put them next to each other, sort of half the screen on one and half the screen on the other. So now I can actually see my profit and loss and my balance sheet next to each other. Now I probably want to click on the 3 little lines in the top left of the screen so I can remove that toolbar, give me a little bit more real estate. I probably also want to click on that little triangle to remove the control panel for the reports. That way we can get a little bit more real estate there, and that will give me just a much better, easier way to compare my my reports next to each other. Now something else that's fairly forgotten, in my opinion, is the zoom in and zoom out. People forget that stuff all the time. So if you hit Command plus in the Mac and Command minus, you actually zoom in. So Command plus zooms in and Command minus zooms out. People always complain about the font being too big or too small. That's usually the best thing to do. So if you're in a Mac, you Command plus, or if you're in a PC, you Control plus. So Control plus, Control minus will help you zoom in and zoom out of the screen, and that becomes really useful depending on your screen that you're in. Some screens are some screens themselves are too big or too small depending on the user, and the font itself could be too big and too small. The other important thing is that these things can time out. So you may want to go into your settings in the gearbox and go into account and settings, and you want to set up in your advanced tab. You want to go to advanced tab, and you want to go all the way down to your timeout. Where's my timeout settings? Right here where it says other preferences, and it says sign me out if inactive. Move that to 3 hours. That's going to help you, because sometimes people will leave a tab open and that tab remains inactive for a while, a detached tab, and it can log you out of QuickBooks. So maximize that timeout to 3 hours. That way you reduce the probabilities of that second window timing you out and automatically logging you out of QuickBooks. So again, you can grab that tab and you can drag it and bring it back into your browser if you want to, and you can re-expand the browser size if you want to work back into the tabs. But you would have to make the browser smaller, click and drag, and peel it out. Okay, I know this stuff is kind of fast. We're trying to cover a lot of things in a short period of time, so make sure you rewatch the recording if that was a bit fast for you. Okay, and somebody's asking, the timeout feature, is that per user? Yeah, that's actually for the entire QuickBooks file. So that's actually not per user. So the entire QuickBooks file, once you set it up to 3 hours, it's set up for the entire QuickBooks file. Okay, so those were the Chrome browser shortcuts, or at least the ones worth talking about. Let's talk about Chrome bookmarks. Let me close these two things. And to me, Chrome bookmarks are actually really, really valuable, and I think they're very much underused. What you want to do is create sort of a menu style of setup through bookmarks in your Google Chrome to make everything faster to access. So for example, I'm going to click on banking. Okay, so I'm going to click on banking, so that takes me into the banking window. Notice on the top of the screen in the URL, that's called a custom URL. That means that if you were to type that URL by hand, it will take you straight into the banking screen, regardless of where you are. So because of that, I can actually create a shortcut for this. So what I can do is I can click on bookmarks and click bookmark this page. Okay, depending on, I think it's Control D or Command D on the Mac to do it. So you can hit Command D, Control D, bookmark this page, and then you will have this drop-down menu here on the right side next to the star that says, okay, I'm adding a new bookmark. So what do I want to call this? So the name defaulted to bank and credit cards. I can give it its own name. I'm going to call it banking. So I'm just going to call it banking, and then click on done. And what this is going to do is, now I may have to enable my bookmarks. I have to click on show bookmarks. Okay, and that will show. So there it is. So I clicked on the settings button on the right side, and then clicked on bookmarks and show bookmarks, and now they're showing. And now you will notice here on the top of the screen, hopefully you can see my cursor, it says banking. So now I can go straight into banking from there. So what I want to do is I want to create a menu in the top that gives me all the shortcuts. So I want to do one for sales. Okay, and I want to hit Control D or Command D, create that. I'm going to call it sales, and then click on done. And then I want to click on invoices. Okay, and the same thing, Command D or Control D, and then call this invoices. Okay, you obviously see what I mean by that. Go into customers, the same thing, Control D, Command D, create that shortcut list. And so now you're seeing that I have basically sort of a menu in there, so I can quickly go to where I want to be. So the idea is that obviously you only set them up for the ones that are useful or valuable for you. And you can also rename any of these. So if you give it the wrong name, for example, I want to call this item list, I can just right click on it and then click on edit. Okay, so I can right click on the shortcut, click on edit, and then I can just call this item list. Okay, whatever you want to call it, it's really up to you. You know, how this stuff is logically organized for you or not. And then I click on save. So all that stuff will be now set up there. Now, some people suggest to do these in a sort of in a Windows drop-down type of menu. So that would be really useful for reports. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to right-click in any empty space on my bookmarks bar, and I'm going to click on New Folder. Okay, and then I'm going to call this Reports. Okay, so I'm creating a folder called Reports. I'm going to click on Save. So now I see a folder in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a drop-down style menu inside of Reports. So I'm going to go into Reports. We were talking about setting up the drop-down menu in a folder for the report. So I'm going to click on Balance Sheet. Okay, and I'm going to add the bookmark from the balance sheet. So I'm going to hit Bookmark, bookmark this page. I can also hit Control D. But the trick is, it's going to ask me, is this going to go into a folder? And the answer is yes. It's going to go into the Reports folder. And then we're going to call this P&L. And then click on Save. So I'll hit the drop down, that will say P&L. So the second one is I'm going to go into Reports and let's say the balance sheet. Let's pull up the balance sheet. And then I'll save this bookmark. Okay. And we'll call this one Balance Sheet. And we'll save that one. So now I have a drop-down menu that, let me do this again because I think I may have screwed this up. Let me go to Profit and Loss, Bookmark, put it on the Reports, and we'll call this one P&L. Hit done. I think I have both of them. Okay, yes, now I got both of them in there. So if I click on the drop-down and click on Balance Sheet, that will pull up my balance sheet. And if I click on drop-down P&L, that will pull down my P&L. There's one little thing that's wrong with this, and I know that the people that have done this before, it drives them absolutely nuts, which is the problem with this URL is that it actually contains the company name as part of it. So the problem with this, and this is really, really important, pay very close attention if you're going to be doing this. If I open up somebody else's QuickBooks file and I run my drop-down report from here, it's going to show me somebody else's information with Craig's Landscaping Services as the title. So there's a little bit of a trick to it. I have to go into the reports and into the folder, and I have to click on Bookmarks Manager, and I actually have to edit each of the bookmarks, and it's kind of annoying. I know this is kind of heavy. So that's only if you want to do reports, and I have to find in the URL where my company information is showing. Okay, so normally I just do a quick search here and type Craig. So right there where it says company name, and I'll just delete the entire string from company name all the way to the first and sign. So yeah, I know this is strange, but unfortunately, the only way to, where is it? Here, right here. So this whole string here that you see, and you may need to go back and check the recording, from the C of company name all the way to the and sign, I actually have to delete it from the shortcut and click on save. Just because, again, the challenge is that when this URLs get saved in here, the report title comes along. So if you didn't do this and you open a different company file, assuming that you manage multiple QuickBooks files, it's going to show the name of the first person where you saved it. So long story short, don't worry about this if you're not saving reports in here. So I hope I didn't lose you on that. So if I'm not saving reports, then I don't have to do all that. Okay. So that's it. That's really it. That's doing the bookmarks. That's really valuable. And if you right click in there, you can click on show bookmarks bar, and that will remove it and you won't be able to see it. And then in order to get it back, you have to click on all the way to the right here next to the Chrome user icon. Click on that drop down menu, and you have to click on bookmarks and then click on show bookmarks bar. And there's a keyboard shortcut for it, which is Shift Control B or Control Shift B, Control Command Shift Command B. So you have to make sure that you have the capacity to enable and disable that bookmarks bar enabled to see that. That to me, it's a huge really, really important, valuable piece of this whole thing. Now, on the other part, that's really, really important. And like I mentioned, all the parameters that you see in this URL, beginning date, end date, they're all editable. So anything that you save in there, you may have to change it in the string itself if you want some other data to show up next time you pull that report. So if you hit last month, this month, that sort of thing, you have to make sure that you make all those changes in the report before you save that bookmark. Now, multiple Chrome users are really, really important, because one of the criticisms that QuickBooks Online has is I can't open more than one company file at the time. And the answer is that's not true. You can. What you have to do is you have to create multiple Chrome users. So here on the right side of the screen, you're going to see a little tiny logo, which is your Chrome user, which is basically sort of a profile inside Google Chrome. So if you click on that Chrome user button and then you click on Manage People, and these are not QuickBooks users, these are Chrome users, you can create multiple Chrome users. And as long as you have multiple Chrome users, I can click on any of these, okay? And it's going to open up another browser window for that. So I'm going to click here and click on one of my users. That is going to open up an entirely different browser window. Okay, that's here. So actually I had to drag it from my other screen. So I have my one Chrome user here, right, on this side. And then let me exit out of PowerPoint. Okay, and then I have my other Chrome user on the right side here. And the way I know my Chrome users is because there's a tiny little icon there based on the Chrome user. So you want to have, this one's called QBO CPA Academy, and this Chrome user is a little horse, and this one's called Hector at QBK. So as long as I have two separate Chrome users going at the same time, I can log into two different QuickBooks files that are separate, and I can be looking at the reports from one and the reports for other, and it doesn't log me out, because the QuickBooks login and security, it's per Chrome user. Also, the settings, such as the bookmarks, are also per Chrome user. So you can have one Chrome user for one company file, another Chrome user for another company file, depending on how you use it and what shortcuts you need, that will work. Okay. And then a question about this report shortcuts, and I didn't want to confuse people. This is only for when you save reports as bookmarks. Everything else doesn't require you to touch the URL, only when you save reports as bookmarks. Okay? All right, so I wanted to clarify that to make sure that there's no confusion on that, because that often does bring some confusion. Okay, so that was Chrome browser shortcuts, Chrome bookmarks, and multiple Chrome users. Okay, so let's talk about one of my favorite, which is called Batch Send Open Invoices and Reminders. So let's talk about that. Let me maximize the screen. So if you have open invoices, I'm going to click on sales and invoices real quick. So I'm going to look at all my open invoices here. So these are all my open invoices that are here, right? These are all my overdue, my open invoices, whatever they happen to be. So if I have multiple invoices that are open or overdue, one of the things that we may want to do is we want to send our client reminders, right? So there's a little drop-down menu next to each invoice, and you can click on Send Reminder. So when you click on Send Reminder, you will have this pop-up screen that will, have the customer's email. It will say Subject Reminder, and it will have a predetermined text that says, hey, just reminding that you haven't paid this invoice yet, right? So it's going to be different than the original invoice in which I was collecting from our customers. This is actually just a reminder. Okay, so if I just do one, it will be a one-off thing, and we click on Send. Now, if I want to send everybody reminders in one shot, what I can do is I can click on the Select All button here right under Batch Actions. We have the Select All button that will select all the transactions. Then I can click on Batch Actions, and then I can click on Send Invoices. So if I go here, Select All, Batch Actions, Send Invoices, that is going to create a standard invoice email, not a reminder email to everyone. But for some strange reason, they didn't add the batch reminders on this dropdown, but they did add it on the All Sales tab. So if I click on All Sales and then I filter, for example, only, let's say, open invoices. So let's go overdue invoices. I'll click on apply. So I've actually filtered through here and then click on select all. Then I can click on batch action and I can send the reminders from here. This send transactions basically means send email. But this send reminders will send everybody a reminder email, not a original invoice email, which will have different texts. Now, most people ask, well, wait, how do I set the difference between the default text email and the default reminder email? That's here in the gearbox. So we'll click on the gearbox and then we'll click on account settings. And then we're going to click on sales. So on the sales tab, then we're going to scroll down and we're going to see here where it says reminders. So when you click on reminders, this is the default text that you have. So whatever text you want to put, like, hey, if you're having trouble paying, call us to set up a payment plan or whatever, right? Whatever it happens to be. That would be the place to do it. You can also set it up to send you a copy of that. That way you can, prove to them that you did send them reminders. So if you go to messages, on the messages place, that's where you would change the template for the invoice itself. So you may have different text, different moods, different things that you're sending to the customer in terms of messaging, whether it's the original first time you send them the invoice or is a reminder that they haven't paid you. Okay, so that's just a really important piece of that. So that's batch send open invoices and batch send reminders. We're making good time here. So let's talk about default report dates. And these two are accountants only. So I have to show you kind of how that works. I'm going to log into my own QuickBooks Online accountant account to be able to do this. So let me log into that. So I can't use a sample file for this. So we're going to talk about two specific features that are only available to accountants. One is called default report dates, and the other one is called undo reconciliations in batch. Okay, so I'm going to log into my QuickBooks Online accountant account. And I'm going to log into one of these clients at random here. Okay, so if I were to pull a report, so if I'm going to go to reports and click on, let's say, profit and loss report, automatically this is going to default to this year to date, right? So unfortunately, the QuickBooks reports, they all have their own default predetermined date range that comes out. If you're working on somebody's books and you're working on, let's say, last year, then really you want to go back and look at this report always for last year. You don't want to have to click on the drop down here and click on last year every single time. So there's a little feature here. It's kind of hidden. You click on the briefcase and in the top of the screen, and then you go to report tools. So you click on the briefcase, you click on report tools. Let me do that again. Briefcase report tools. And then here there's a little thing that says report and tools default. Now this doesn't work for end users, only accountants have access to this tool. So here I can put date, I can click on, let's say, last month, and then I can click here on accrual, whatever I want it to be. I don't have to click a save or anything like that, just change it here. And then when I go back to look at those reports for that particular client, whatever it happens to be, I'm going to look at these reports. And then I'm going to look at the profit and loss. To profit and loss. Okay, by default, my report is going to default to last month. So this is not a QuickBooks end user centric tool. This is a QuickBooks accountant centric tool, and this will default for all of your of your clients. So and you have to be able to click on that briefcase. So if you're not logged in as an accountant, if you don't see that big accountant icon, if you don't see that big green icon in the top of the screen, then you're not going to be able to get the briefcase, and you're not going to be able to do that. So you have to be able to be, I'm logging into another client here. You have to be able to log in as an accountant. You have to be able to see that briefcase that's on top of the screen. Otherwise, you won't be able to get to the report tool. So that's only available for accountants. The other tool that's available for accountants is batch undo reconciliations. Okay, so the way that works is we'll click on the gear menu, and then we'll click on reconcile. And then we can click on where it says history. So we're going to go to the reconciliation history. On the right of the screen, it says history by account. So we're going to click on history by account. So you're going to get your entire reconciliation history. And let's say, for example, I wanted to undo the reconciliation for the entire year. And this is a live file, so I'm not going to do it for real. But let's say we're going to do that. I can go back to the month that I want to do it for. So let's say I want to undo the whole year. I go back to January. I click on the drop-down menu, and I click on batch undo. Okay, so once I click on batch undo, it's going to ask me, are you sure? And I'll go back and undo all the reconciliations, which is extremely useful when end users are messing with QuickBooks and they're making all sorts of crazy stuff in there. Okay, so that's actually just really important. So we go to the beginning of the month, or all the way back to the one I want to undo reconciliation. I click on the little drop-down menu, and I click on batch undo. And it's also important to note that only accountants can log in and undo reconciliations. End users can't. So undoing a reconciliation is something that anyone can do. If I click on the first one, it'll just say undo. But if I click on one before that, so notice that if I click on the latest one, it'll say undo. But if I click on the second one, it'll say batch undo. So that means it's going to undo everything up to that date. Okay, so that was the 8th top tip, undo reconciliations. Let's talk about backup attachments. And that to me is just really, really useful. So let me tell you what that means. So let me go back into a QuickBooks file here. Okay, and I'm going to go into the attachments window. So I'm going to click on the gear menu, and then I'm going to click on attachments. So I'm clicking on gear menu and attachments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let me minimize the PowerPoint here just so I can show you. I'm going to go ahead and send some random attachments into my QuickBooks file. So I'm going to click and drag any data that I have on my desktop, really. I'm going to click and drag and bring it over to my attachments. So I'm actually just bringing over attachments over. So now I have a whole bunch of attachments in this screen. So everything that I have attached is going to be sitting here. Now, also, if I have attached it to a transaction, so if I create, for example, a check, and that check has an attachment attached to it. So I'm going to just do a quick check here for $0, just for the heck of it. And then I'm going to attach one of these files into the attachments window. Okay, so again, this is assuming that you're attaching transactions to accounts or you're attaching receipts or documents to accounts or transactions. They're all going to show up on this attachment screen, which I clicked on the gear menu and click on attachments. Then my recommendation is at the end of each year, what you want to do is you want to click on the select all box up there in the screen, and then click on batch actions and click on export. And what this will do is it will actually generate a zip file for you, depending on how big, how many attachments you have. This may take a few minutes. It will generate a zip file, if you see there on the bottom, that I can actually click and drag over to my computer. And I'm going to double click here to show you real quick. And then now I'm going to have a folder that contains all of my attachments organized by transaction name, by transaction number, by document number, and you're all going to see all the attachments that have been entered there. Trust me when I tell you, this feature is huge in terms of how useful it is, but most people don't know about it. So it's kind of a hidden feature, and to me is one of the biggest, most important ones. So you probably want to do it year by year. So you want to do it every single year, and maybe sort it by uploaded and try to avoid during every year. But that's okay if you keep archiving old information. That's not a problem. Unfortunately, I can't filter by transaction date. So it's either all or none, right? So I can't say only last year, only this year. So again, I click on select all, click on batch actions, and then I click on export. So, and that's in the attachment screen. So that's just going to create one big zip file over all the accounts that have been selected. Now, in theory, you could click on upload it, and then maybe you can select only a few, only select the ones that you've done this year. You can pick and choose, up to what date you want to do the archiving for, and then you can get of any you want. Now, I really wish that there was a way to filter by the underlying attached transaction date, so I could essentially do one clean year, but no, not possible. And also, there's no way to create one big PDF of all the transactions. So it has to be a zip file, and it downloads every transaction in its original format. So there's no like single report, single PDF for all that in batch. Unfortunately, but it's getting there. I mean, I could print this thing here, which is basically a list of all the attachments, but it doesn't necessarily show the actual attachment itself. So that could be useful too, like a printout of all of my archive. That could be useful just to kind of have a database of everything that's in there. And you can save this as a PDF next to your archive. But yeah, I think it's just better to just download the whole thing as a zip file. Okay, and no, it doesn't delete them. So these are not they don't get deleted once you export it. So this export button doesn't take them out of QuickBooks Online. It just creates a duplicate or a copy. Okay, all right, glad we covered that, because that's actually a really super useful tool. The last one we'll talk about is create a customized report pack for PDF. Again, one of those features that are not so publicized, but very, very useful, which is creating what's called a report pack. And again, I think report pack may be just a made up name from me. I don't need, I don't know what the right name for this is. I call it report pack. You figure out what you want to call it. So a report pack is the following. So if let's say, for example, I want to create one PDF that contains profit and loss, balance sheet, AR aging, and statement of cash flows. So how do I do that? So I'm going to go to profit and loss. I'm going to go to last year, and then I'm going to click on customize, and actually not customize, sorry, save customization, and I'm going to call it profit and loss. But I'm going to create a group. That's really important. That's crucial. You have to create a group to group them together. So I'm going to create a group, and I'm going to call it annual reports. I give it whatever name you want. So I'm going to create a group called annual reports, and I'm going to save it into annual reports, and then click on save. So I'll do the P&L, then I'll do the balance sheet. Okay, also for last year, I'm going to go ahead and save customization, and click on annual reports and click on save. Okay, then I'm going to go reports. Then let's go to, let's say, what did I say? AR aging. AR aging. In this case, there isn't a lot. I'm going to go to save customization, select the drop down, put it under annual reports. Again, I'm saving them all into that group. I'm going to go to reports. I'm going to look for the statement of cash flows. There you are. And I'm going to do this last year, right? I probably should be consistent with all the date ranges. So I'll do last year, set it up in whatever way I want to do it. Click on save customization, annual reports, and save. And there we go. So now they're all in one group. So when I go into reports, and then I click on custom reports, notice that I have basically a group here that says annual reports. I think the AR aging summary here says today. Let me click on that, and let me fix it. So let me click on that, change that to last year. Okay, because I think I forgot to do the date there. Click on run report, and then save it again. Save that again. Go back to reports. Okay, there it is. So now they're all consistent, right? They all say last year. They're all consistent. Now, this is the kicker. Now, pay close attention to this. Again, one of those hidden features that most people don't talk about. On the edit menu, on the action edit menu for the folder name or for the group name, we're going to click on the drop-down menu and click on export as PDF. So we click on export as PDF. And now you're going to notice that it's going to download one single PDF file. I double click on that. That contains, right, my AR aging, my balance sheet, my profit and loss, my statement of cash flows, all in one single PDF. And that, my friends. It's very, very useful. Now, the problem is the ordering process. Like I can't resort these. These are all going to be sorted by their name. So technically, I would have to change the name of it. So let's say I want this to be 3. So I'm going to put 3 AR aging summary. Hope you're noticing that. So I'm putting a 3 there, and then I'm going to click on this one. Whoops, I clicked on it itself. Let me edit the name, and I'm going to put 1. Hope you catch my drift on this one. So I'm changing the order. So if I wanted to modify the order in which I want to see them in, so I wanted to see my balance sheet first, my profit and loss second, my AR aging third, and my cash flows fourth. By the way, you're not going to find this anywhere else. This is like a proprietary thing. I figured this out by a whole lot of trial and error to get here. So I changed the order. So then when I do my PDF, they're now going to be under that new order. They should be anyway. There you go. Balance sheet, P&L, statement of cash flows at the end. So that's just a very particular thing that I came up with. But I have a lot of clients that just want one single PDF with all the reports, including custom reports. So somebody's saying, is this the same thing as management reports? No, management reports is different and it's similar. And you probably could achieve similar things with a management report, which is here on the management reports. But I find these to be a little bit harder to set up. It actually takes longer to put together. I prefer to do those quick PDFs. Okay, so it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. Okay, cool. Yep, I think that's it. So let me close that polling question, and I think I answered all the questions. On the last note, it would be just come join us at QuickBooks Connect. It's going to be a great conference. I think that I mentioned someone saying they're close to selling out. Last year they sold out like 2 weeks before the conference. So now we're talking about we're about a month away. So I don't know if they will sell out or not, but check it out, QuickBooksConnect.com. You can join us for 1 day or for 3 days. I will be one of the trainers there. There's actually quite a bit of people. And it's always in San Jose, California. So check that out. And if you don't have any other questions, comments, or concerns, that will be it for me.